Sustainability is a game of Tetris. Well, it used to be. Back then, when people talked about the hole in the ozone layer, they felt they were saving the planet. It was certainly a major issue, but only one among many. It was still a game of Tetris when we started talking about global warming, when saving the environment meant planting a few trees or cleaning up a stretch of beach, to offset our impact. Just like in Tetris, we kept stacking blocks in our own corner, watching the wall rise, while convincing ourselves we were buying a little more time. We were still playing in single-player mode. And then, one day, the world discovered Minecraft, that pixelated world-building game that went on to become the best-selling video game of all time. With Minecraft, multiplayer mode was switched on. Instead of trying to clear lines, we started talking to one another. We developed a shared vision, a plan. We started building. We stopped focusing on isolated environmental issues and began talking about climate as a whole and about a broader philosophy, sustainability. Make sense? Make sense. Welcome to Make Sense, a leap in pop culture to explore societal challenges. A podcast from SKEMA Business School. So how did we move from a logic of stacking blocks like in Tetris to a logic of building worlds like in Minecraft? How did we go from 2 dimensions to 3? And perhaps most importantly, how do we actually win the game? To answer these questions, I'm joined today by Antoine Kunsch, Director of Sustainability at Red Bull and a graduate of SKEMA Business School. He's come all the way from Los Angeles, the perfect city to show us how to give sustainability wings. Hello, Antoine.
Hello, Mary.
You're 38 years old and you've been working in sustainability for the last 15 years. You're also someone who got your degree from SKEMA in 2012 and you got a degree in environmental management, which is quite a pioneering thing.
That's very nice of you to say. At the time, it didn't necessarily feel like that. I remember when I was, trying to decide where I wanted to go, what I wanted to be, I was mostly driven by finding a way to have an impact. I navigated to the world of biology, biochemistry because of my familial history. My grandfather was a forest park ranger. My dad was a biology teacher. So all the kind of science, biology world was there. And I did 1 year in public university in biology, biochemistry, and I had one class that was an introduction to environmental management. And I was like, this is really cool. I can see myself doing that for the foreseeable future. The issue with it is that at the time in the public university system, at least where I was, there wasn't a clear path for it. There was a specialization after you get your first degree after 3 years, but not right away. And I'm not necessarily very patient. If you ask my husband, he's going to tell you that I can be pretty stubborn. And I was like, hey, there is this program in the south of France with SERAM at the time, now SKEMA, in environmental management. And they had a science track. And I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And so moved down to the south of France. And I'm very fortunate to have parents that were supportive of that move. They were probably very anxious as well of trying to figure out what the hell I was trying to do. But they were supportive. I did it. And here I am.
Way back then in 2011, 2012, what was sustainability looking like?
So when I started, I worked in Paris for about a couple of years in sustainability, corporate sustainability, or CSR, it was called at the time. And most of the job was collecting data. We had about 180 indicators across environmental, social, governance dimensions. So it was a lot of piecing things together. So we're talking about video games, we're talking about Tetris. There was a little bit of a Tetris. I was I'm reaching out to that team, trying to put together the report, the documentation that we needed at the time. And it was very much a solo game. Like our team was 2 people, and we had a lot of that we were trying to piece together to eventually make a compelling story.
And I believe that there was a milestone there with the GHG protocol scope. Is that correct?
Yes. So the GHG protocol, it's one of the main framework in sustainability. And it was developing, like the initial framework was developed a few years ago, but in 2011, there was what we call Scope 3, which is all the indirect emission. It's got all the value chain and how do you account for the carbon that is part of the value chain of the company. And so that framework came out in 2011. So there was a lot going on in sustainability at that time because we were figuring out, okay, how do we measure accurately the footprint of companies? So it was new, it was emerging, and that's at the time where like some of the most important like milestone framework were coming out.
And coming to today, have we actually moved into Minecraft territory now?
I would say so, yeah. And funny thing is Minecraft, I think, also came out in 2011. So interesting timing. But yeah, sustainability is much different now than it was back then. Now it's much more, we have all those frameworks that are in full force. We're not trying so much like piece things together like the same way you were trying to do at Tetris and completing rows. It's much more intentional in the way you're doing it. Like we have science-based targets, we have net zero programs, so we actually trying to decarbonize our emission, decarbonize our product, and we have this kind of like structure to help us with it. We're building something. It's not like we're trying to make sense of the different blocks and trying to react to things that are falling on our lap. It's like we're much more intentional about the direction and we're playing in a team. Sustainability teams are still relatively small, but I work hand in hand with my colleagues in logistics, in procurement, on the fleet side. It's really like throughout the organization now that we have those sustainability targets.
Well, we all know that Minecraft has a collective dimension, and we know that it's more than a game, it's an ecosystem, and it's built around this foundation of shared values, bringing gamers together. It's a marketplace, it's a community, it's a creator network, and it's where people work together, they co-create, and they get inspired from one another. So are we really there yet in sustainability today?
I'd say so, yes. And that's the part that is the most exciting about the job that I'm doing, because now we have really a peer network of sustainability practitioners across multiple companies, across different industries. And for example, like earlier this year, I got involved with the Smart Freight Center, which is one of those nonprofit organizations that is really specializing in how do we decarbonize logistics emission, how do we decarbonize ocean, air, over-the-road transportation. And what's unique with that type of system is that I get to talk to people who are trying to solve the same problem that I am. So we talk about alternative fuels, we talk about electrification, we talk about what works, what doesn't. So we really have that kind of like network approach that eventually allows us to make more progress and even like aggregate the demand that we have for sustainable solution to really move the needle in those industries that can be like very hard to decarbonize, especially in some geographies.
I suppose that in the US, would it be like a federal sustainability norms that you have to follow, or does each state do what it wants to do?
It's pretty much up to the state. Like the federal guidance is minimal, I would say, but especially when you compare to Europe, like you're comparing two very different environments in there. But I would add a caveat to that. When you're talking about the US and when you're talking about California, the state itself, has quite a few laws and regulations that are really trying to push things forward. They're doing that slightly differently than Europe does it. Europe is going to pretty much tell you, you need to do X, and this is how you need to do it. They're going to dictate more or less how you achieve that goal. In California, they're going to tell you, hey, this is the direction, this is where you need to go, figure it out. Use the market to figure it out, like create what you need to create, but this is where you need to go. And they did that recently with like some packaging regulation where they set the star of like reducing most of your packaging by 25% by 2032, which is very ambitious. But they're letting the market organize itself to solve that problem.
I think it must be tricky for global companies to navigate between the US and the European frameworks. I can't imagine that that's simplistic.
No, it is fairly complex, and that's why like most global companies like Red Bull, we do have sustainability experts in different markets. I'm in the US, I have colleagues in Canada, in the UK, in Spain, in Poland, so kind of like have a growing team, and we have our team in headquarters as well in Austria. So we are really serving as like the beams, the experts in those regions.
On that subject, we do tend to have this point of view in Europe that the United States is still very Tetris from the sustainability perspective, whereas in Europe it's a little bit more Minecraft. Would you say that that's an exaggeration?
Like, I see it. I understand why people would have that vision. But yeah, I would push back a little bit. But when it comes to very specific topic, like the one I was giving around packaging is an example where you have regulation about packaging both in Europe and in the US. It's just different way of getting to that goal. So there are some areas where California sometimes can even be more ambitious than in Europe, and that tend to surprise my colleagues as well.
Okay, interesting. Well, we know that Red Bull is obviously an energy drink company, but it's also a Formula One team, and it's an extreme sports brand. So at the core of this is performance. Sometimes, though, performance could be opposite to sustainability. So what's interesting, obviously, in your case, is that performance seems to drive sustainability. How do you pull that paradox off?
Yeah, I think that idea that the opposite of sustainability is going to be efficiency in some way or form, maybe a leftover of what sustainability was back in 2011. Now we're really part of those core business conversation on how do we improve efficiency, how do we improve resiliency, how do we plan for the future. Sustainability is a key component of all of that and a topic of conversation. And you have a lot of companies that are going through that transition, and they're using sustainability as leverage here to increase their performance. They're going to talk about environmental performance, social performance. So there's really that idea that they can leverage sustainability to achieve those goals and not just see it as like a cost center like it was seen in the past. You still have some companies that are more traditional and will see it that way. I had interviews even a few years ago where people were asking me, okay, how are you going to offset your salary? How are you going to pay for your job through sustainability measures?
Okay, so the objective underpinning your performance metrics is net zero by 2040. So actually, what does having no impact mean? We hear it all the time, and is it even realistic?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and I think we need to demystify some of it a little bit about what it means to have no impact, what it means to be net zero. The definition of net zero itself, it's not that you don't have any impact. It's more so that you're making operational changes within your supply chain to reduce the impact where it's happening. And once you've done everything that you can to kind of like reduce that impact, there's always a portion that's going to be like extremely hard to remove. And then you can use like market mechanism, like carbon offsets, to kind of like offset somewhere else the impact that you have here and that you cannot eliminate. Notion that net zero means having no impact, I'd be careful around that, because you can't create something, you can't create a product without actually having an impact somewhere. Or if you say that, it's a little misleading. I think there's a company, Patagonia, that is like world famous for their sustainability strategy, and they're very transparent about that. They're like, what we do is not sustainable. We are creating product. We have a clothing and apparel brand, but what we can do is reduce whatever we can to get to that like net zero point.
Could you give me an example of a net zero application?
Sure. One example that comes to mind is going to be on packaging and beverages. But when you take, for example, an aluminum product, an aluminum can, how do you reduce the impact of that? So you need to think, obviously, throughout the production cycle when you're actually making the aluminum and the source of energies that are involved in the production of the aluminum rolls and the forming of the cans. And then you can think as well about, okay, how do we recapture maybe that aluminum at the end of the life cycle once the user had the beverage and they're all energized and they're ready to go? How do we capture that can and funnel it back into our supply chain? Because by doing so, you're going to be reducing the amount of energy that is required to mine the aluminum, process it, transform it by 90+%. So that's an example of an impact that you can really reduce, but you're not eliminating it. Like the impact is still there. So there's still something that you need to accommodate there to actually eliminate that aspect.
So we mentioned earlier that Minecraft is an ecosystem. And obviously when a player is playing Minecraft, there's individual goals, but to achieve the individual goals, people have to work together. So there's an incentive on relying on others. And in what ways would you say that sustainability teams depend on others to be both high performing and sustainable at the same time?
Yeah, and that's a big part of the job. Sustainability teams, most often than not, are very lean. We're wearing multiple hats. We're trying to do a lot of things, but what primary function, at least in a lot of organizations, is to set that direction that I was talking before when we're talking about net zero goals or having some climate targets. So setting the direction, developing the roadmap to show others what we need to do and when, and then rely on the expertise of the other teams to be able to deliver that roadmap. So I talk a lot with my peers on the logistics side, on the procurement side, on the event side, and I translate for them what zero means. I translate for them what some of the solution can be. But for example, for events, I don't know how to run in events. They're the expert. They know how to do it. And so I can give them the tools, support them, and they will appropriate that information to integrate that into their own practice. But yeah, it is a team's game, and our goal is just to be a support function and helping everybody else to achieve those goals.
Would you say that sometimes the best ideas come from your partners?
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's a great example when we work with the partners. So I mentioned the partner that we have internally. But we also have a lot of vendors and companies we work with that are not part of the organization. And that goes back to earlier when we talked about the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 3 guidance that came out in 2011. That's that value chain. Those are the vendors that you work with every day. And they know their business better than I will ever know it. So when I have a conversation with them, I can be like, hey, we have a goal to be net zero by that point. Can you show me how you're going to do it? And I let that open to them to figure it out. It's kind of like the same approach between the Europe and the US when I was talking about. One is more like setting the direction and telling you how to get there versus California that is more like telling you what the goal is in X number of years and letting you figure out with the market dynamics on how that's going to get achieved. So it's kind of like the same relationship that we have with vendors in the supply chain.
So we've been talking about innovation, and innovation requires exploration, which is really at the heart of Minecraft, the adventure of exploring. Could Minecraft be a kind of sandbox? Could it be a place where people can experiment sustainability solutions?
Yeah, I think I'm always, up to trying those kind of fun solutions. And I think actually Minecraft that they did that with the United Nations a few years ago. It was back in 2017 where the UN worked with communities in Addis Ababa, where they engage with the local communities on how to design their environment, and how they use Minecraft for that. So the communities use the tool, they design all kinds of things using the game, and then they handed the design over to the city planners who were actually making the decision. So that's a fantastic example of community participation, and I think we should be doing a little more of that.
To finish with, how will we know that we've actually won the game when it comes to sustainability? Is there such a thing as an end game, or is this a game that never really ends?
I would love it if there was an end game and we solved it once and for all, but I don't think there is. And it's kind of funny that we're talking about Tetris and Minecraft because there's no end game either. You keep dealing with blocks that are falling from the sky, or you keep building an environment, but eventually the goal is to stay in the game. And I think that's what we're doing with sustainability and what we've successfully been doing for the past few years, where we've been building up what sustainability means for organization, how we support organization and moving from just trying to manage the environmental and social impact of doing business to being actually a core support function for those organizations that are driving towards like very ambitious goals like net zero. So I think the end game is, to stay in the game.
If you want to finish with Tetris and Minecraft, what would you say?
Yeah, well, I think Tetris, it's really that you continue dealing with the blocks falling until you lose and until you crash. And Minecraft, which is kind of like the model that we're in now, you just keep building and you keep creating and you keep that going to create new support system.
Thank you so much, Antoine. That was great.
Thank you.
Have you noticed that Tetris and Minecraft are video games without heroes, unlike Sonic or Mario? And that's exactly the direction sustainability is heading today. There won't be a single savior. There will be many. As our guest, Antoine Kunsch, essentially argues, when it comes to sustainability, the real hero is the system. I know what you're thinking. I'm about to tell you that the solution is for everyone to get involved, for every company to do its part. Well, not quite. It's a little more subtle than that. A system is not simply a collection of stakeholders. Putting Apple and Patagonia in the same room is not enough to generate impact. One of Antoine Kunsch's key references is Donella Meadows, an American researcher who studied at Harvard and later worked at MIT. According to her, what matters is not who makes up a system, but how that system is designed. System structure is the source of system behavior. One of the most common mistakes in sustainability is to focus on symptoms, changing a number or offsetting an impact. The real leverage lies elsewhere. It lies in the rules and interactions and goals that shape the behavior of the entire system. In Minecraft, that's what separates beginners from experienced players. While some simply place blocks, others automate farms and build transportation networks in order to move resources across their world. But why would companies, sometimes direct competitors, choose to build a shared system when they could simply maximize their own interests? The answer can be found in the work of two researchers, Eva Niston, Director of the SKEMA Center for Sustainability, and Albert Jolink, Professor of Strategic Management at SKEMA. Their research shows that companies often achieve better environmental outcomes when they collaborate with other actors, rather than acting alone. Environmental alliances allow them to create environmental value, which improves their environmental performance. In turn, that environmental value can be transformed into economic value with lower costs, stronger reputations, or access to new markets. There's an interesting example that they cite. This is the example of Whirlpool and Honeywell. Their collaboration and sharing of knowledge and technologies basically led to the development of an environmentally friendly insulation foam for refrigerators. So, performance and sustainability can go hand in hand, provided we focus on building rather than simply stacking blocks. And if you still need convincing, remember that in Minecraft, every player starts with access to the same blocks. Yet some build a cabin while others build a city. The difference is not in the bricks, it is in the way that they are organized. If sustainability is a multiplayer game, what about careers? With Charles Arkwright, we switch to a game that seems far more individualistic, Mario Kart, and tackled a deceptively simple question. How do you end up taking your boss's job? The answer is waiting for you in the episode. Just press play on your favorite podcast platform and enjoy the show.